Cheer up, girls. You're going to be the veterans of a bank robbery. There's no money here.
Come on, Sonny!
It's for you.
What?
Telephone call. For you.
I didn't find it. An associate of mine found it. It was a piece done for Life magazine about this incident. And he brought it to me. He thought it would make a great film, and I agreed with him, and that's how it started.
It looks... Just keep talking like nothing was wrong.
What was wonderful to me about it is it portrayed a life or a lifestyle that nobody had ever seen before.
Said he was his wife. They were married in a church.
It was about a guy who was in love with another man. It was a gay relationship, but without the dirty jokes and the extent that one character went through to prove his love.
Leon! Happy birthday!
And it was a first. It was different.
Well, it started with a call from Marty Elfond to partner with Marty Bregman. Both of them agent managers and producers who were very closely associated with Al Pacino.
I actually heard about it while it was taking place, the bank robbery. And then later on, they actually quoted in the article that it looks like a part for Al Pacino to play. So everybody laughed about it. It was nothing. And then sure enough, Marty Bregman and Marty Elfond got the screen rights to it.
And they had read this Life magazine article and saw pictures of John Woodowitz, who was the real-life bank robber, and noted that he bore a startling resemblance to Al Pacino. So the light bulb went on, and they said, this is a picture that we could get made, and they sent me the stuff, and I said yes, and we were off and running. So I acquired this enormous library of tapes and the newspaper reports and so on, and began to try to figure out what kind of movie this should be. Because there are a lot of different ways you could tell this story.
Why didn't you wait and try to take them outside? I made an error in judgment.
Nothing was ever quite the same in the way the police handled hostage situations after Dog Day Afternoon.
Nobody said hostage yet, you understand?
It became, and it still is, part of police training for dealing with similar kinds of situations where the crowds are out of control and all the rest of it. Is that what it was about? Should it be seen from the outside as this event? There's the bank, those are the people in there, and we were talking about the media and the media coverage of it?
That's all I can tell you right now, fellas. When I get it, you'll get it, okay? That's all.
Is that what it's about? Is it the teller's story? Is it the policeman's story who has to struggle with the situation and deal with something that he doesn't understand?
What are we dealing with here?
Many of the police were morally offended when they discovered, the issues of sexuality involved.
You shouldn't let something like that spoil your fun, You gotta get fun out of life.
And after a while, I decided that the best way to tell the story was from the point of view of the bank robber himself, why he went there, how he conducted himself, and what the results were for that character, and made the decision that we would tell it entirely from inside the bank. In the meantime, I'm still trying. The one person I've not been able to reach was John Woodowitz, the Al Pacino character, the actual bank robber, because he was in a dispute over what he might get paid. And every time I went to the prison to interview him, they would send down the word that he doesn't want to see me. So after a while, I realized I was never going to get to see him. So I then sat down and tried to think about what sort of a character is John Woodowitz. I went through my research. And I looked at and listened to my tapes and so on, what his heterosexual wife said about him.
He might have done it, his body functions might have done it, but he himself, he didn't do it.
What his mother said about him.
He should have come to me if he needed money.
What the cops said about him.
You look all squeezed out.
What the bank teller said about him.
He don't have a plan. It's all a whim.
Everybody that I could reach. How did they see John Woodowitz? What kind of a character was he in their minds? And it was also contradictory. It was like every one of them knew a different person and described a different person, and I grew very depressed. I was in such a state of desperation that I was about to call my agent and ask him to just drop the whole thing, but by then I'd spent the advance, and I didn't have the money to pay it back, so I was kind of stuck. So I went back to see if there was one element in common that I could see that everybody had about John. Well, basically, he would be looking at you, and he would say, I'll take care of you. I'll make you happy.
All right, who has to go to the bathroom here?
I do too.
Oh, you see, now they all want to go.
And then he's going to fail. And that's the story of the bank. Now I knew how I could write it, because I knew what a character like that would be. All the elements now were cooking, and just after Christmas, I finished. Sydney was in London.
Visita mi
So
canal.
Al and I and Marty Bregman, Marty Elfon, all flew to London. We went to Sydney's apartment, and I handed him the screenplay. And he said, what's it about? And I said, it's about a guy who imagines that he's a magician who can make everybody happy and whole.
You think it's easy? You know, I gotta keep them cooled out. I gotta keep all you people happy. I gotta have all the ideas, and I gotta do it all alone. I'm working on it.
And thereby gain their love and support and so on. But when he fails, as he inevitably does, he gets instead anger, rage, and rejection. He said, oh, well, that sounds interesting. I guess I better read it. And Al said, I guess I better read it too. And the next morning, Al said, it's a great screenplay. I love it. It's a terrific story. But I'm not going to do it.
I decided to play it, and then I had second thoughts about it. Basically, I really didn't want to work. I didn't want because I knew with Sidney Lumet, you sort of have to work. I mean, he really puts you in there and works you. And at the time, I just thought, why would I want to do this now? I'm tired. I want to go back on the stage eventually. So they understood that, and they were very gracious. And I thought it was over. And I wished them well with it, of course. I thought it was a good project, a really great project. But wasn't for me, as I put it. I didn't quite see me in that part, anyway. That's how it is with an actor sometimes. You just don't see yourself in something until you start to engage and try to find it. And it's either there or it isn't. And they were going to get another actor. And then Bregman, very intelligently, called me and said, Al, I think you should read it again. I said, Marty, there's just no way I'm going to do this thing. He said, please, as a friend, read it cover to cover for me. I said, okay, I'll do it. So I read it. And it became so clear to me. I thought, especially having been reading scripts, that you keep getting scripts all the time, and they're never up to that kind of quality, that intensity, that writing and characters, all of these characters in this piece.
I must have been out of my mind.
Yeah, well, you get your mind right. I'm a Catholic, and I don't want to hurt anybody, understand?
And I just put the script down and said, Marty, I'll do it. I'm there.
This is too much. All right, come on, let's go.
And he was back in the game again. So now was just waiting for the summertime to come and the hot days and the hot weather that we really need to make this movie, because by now it's called Dog Day Afternoon. Because the working title at Warner Brothers was Boys in the Bank. And I hated that title, Boys in the Bank, anyway, because I thought it was terribly misleading. It suggests a fluffy, light comedy.
Stevie, don't take the car. Well, how will I get home? Take the subway. We need the car. Stevie, the keys.
And while there's a lot of comedy in Dog Day Afternoon, it's described by David Thompson, the great critic, as a tragic comedy. And I think that that's what it is.
WNEW plays all the hits.
Sidney's a great director, of course, but he's also a director who knows how to put actors together in a space and rehearse them. Not many directors can do that. And he is rehearsing you with the camera in mind, with the visual in mind, because that's what he is. He's a film director. He's not a stage director, and yet he crosses the line and he does both.
And the idea was that they would begin the rehearsals, and maybe 10 days into the rehearsal and so on, I would fly back and watch what was happening, and we would do whatever repair or, finish the screenplay. But what happened was I got an emergency phone call about 3 days into it.
Yeah.
Get your ass on a plane and get to New York. So I grabbed a plane, went straight from the airport to Al's apartment. I said, uh-oh, what's going on? And Al said, well, I'm not going to do it. I can't do it this way. There was a moment in which the cops brought the Chris Sarandon character to the door of the bank to try to get him to talk the Pacino character to come out of the bank. And at the end of it, as they said goodbye, they kissed each other on the lips and parted. And Al said, I'd like to ask you a question. And I said, go ahead. He said, I know enough about you to know that you've had a fairly interesting love life, because I've been married a couple of times. And he said, when those came to an end, how often does sex come into it? And I said, never. That's not what that's about. And he said, well, that's the point I want to make. You don't have to keep reminding them by, pushing the gay issue here. He said, why do you have to keep pushing that in the audience's face? Because they already know it. Why can't you just make a picture about two people who love each other and cannot find a way to live with each other? And, the light bulb went on. I thought, oh, Christ. And it's the best as I can remember, I said to him, that is brilliant.
I thought basically that the most important thing to capture was the human conflict, the human cry, the human need, and to tap that, to try to find that somehow and convey it in this bizarre situation was what we were trying to do. And I thought that a kiss seemed to me exploitive in a way. And it turns out that there was no such thing as a kiss. They never kissed each other. They never saw each other and met. And then you found out there was a phone call.
I convinced Leon to talk to you. He's on the phone now.
That they had a phone call, and then we went to work on a phone call.
Hello?
What I did was I wrote two monologues, one for Al Pacino and one for Chris Sarandon. And they truly, absolutely make the movie, and I am eternally grateful to Al, because I think that if we had done it the way that I had originally written it, it would have been successful, but now forgotten. And that was the greatest gift that an actor could possibly give a writer. So by the end of the rehearsal period, my work was done. So I went down to the soundstage on the first day and just wished everybody well and took off, because they really didn't need me. Sidney is terrific. And if he had needed me, I knew that he would call me and I could come back. I got no calls.
Thanks a lot. And, bon voyage.
We had had a very good working experience on Serpico, Al and Marty and I. So I read the script, let's do it, and off we go. It was quite simple, actually.
I decided on Sidney Lumet because he was gifted, and because he'd worked New York, and because we had a good relationship, and he's a very gifted director.
I'm here with my partner and 9 other people. See, we're dying, man. You're going to see our brains on a sidewalk. They're going to spill our guts out. Now, you're going to show that on television? Have all your housewives look at that instead of As the World Turns? I mean, what do you got for me? I want something for that.
In July, the whole movie had been cast, and largely cast from among Al's sort of repertory theater, the actors that he worked with in New York. Including John Cazale, who was a very close friend and with whom, he'd collaborated so brilliantly in The Godfather and other pictures.
Because I'll tell you right now, I'm ready to do it.
Right.
Okay. I know.
Cazale was playing the part of Sal, who in real life was an extremely confused, very, very young and naive kid that John Woodowitz had picked up in the village. And nobody knew much about the real character. And I described him in the script as a 15-year-old Botticelli angel. And when I look at Cazale, he is the furthest from that picture.
Al has great taste in actors.
Sal, we can do it.
Actors who respond to what he's doing and actors to whom he responds. And I learned a great lesson on that movie because he's written completely differently. He's written to be kind of a real smart-ass street kid. And Al said, Sidney, please, I beg you, read John Cazale for it. John came in, and when John came in, I was so discouraged, I can't tell you. Al's out of his mind. This guy looks 30, 32. It's the last thing I want in this part. And I hadn't seen him in Godfather 1. I hadn't seen the picture at that time. And then he read. And my heart broke.
I just think you ought to take care of your body, that's all.
My body? What for?
Your body is the temple of the Lord.
It was tough at first to sell John, but once Sidney got to see him read and work with me, and I knew John. I worked with him on stage, and I knew him very, very well. But really, what gave us the juice, so to speak, was that we thought of these two people as not knowing each other, having spent so little time together, and then being thrown into a situation this intense.
Come on, Sonny!
so that they were finding out about each other under this kind of pressure.
Why'd you have to light a fire?
And that was a key for us. And then it's just great working with John because he has a way of getting involved in the whole thing, in the characters, and he asks so many questions. I mean, he was just brilliant.
Maybe, to me, the funniest, saddest line in the movie, when the two of them, he and Al, are sitting there, and they're talking about where they want to go. And Al says to him, so where do you want to go, Sal? And then there's this long pause, and John says, just on the take, he had never done it before.
Wyoming.
I had to do that so I didn't ruin the take because it was so funny and yet so heartbreaking. And that came from Cazal.
What? You can't answer me.
Yes, I can answer you.
So
We
you
have
tell me
our
what they were
communication
doing
set up there. We got everything you wanted.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. We got the jet coming into Kennedy. All right?
Al got me that part. But Sidney, I don't think, knew who I was because he wanted me to play another part, the part of the bank manager. So coming out, I ran into Al, and he said, how do you like the part? And I said, well, it's, you know, he said, what do you, he said, it's one of the leads. I said, oh, and then we got confused here. So he went back and he said, this is the guy for the detective. And Sidney said, okay. So that's how I got it.
What I wanted clearly was the difference between a street cop and a suit. And Charles is a wonderful actor, but he was shooting a picture with Bob Wise in California at the same time that he was shooting this. And Bob and I are probably the only two directors who are organized enough and would have trusted each other enough to say yes to it, because I had to know that on Thursday at 11 o'clock, Charlie would be there. And Wise had to know that the following Tuesday at 4 o'clock, he'd be back in California. And it worked out flawlessly.
Who are you?
FBI, Sheldon.
Didn't anybody tell you anything?
I'd like to hear it from you.
Broderick had been in so many TV shows. He was one of my favorite actors because to me he always had a very romantic quality, actually, and that lovely Irish lyrical face. I think he would have been a wonderful, wonderful leading man. But I knew how superb a character actor he was. He's a human searchlight. Never moves quickly, just sweeps from corner to corner and has taken everything in.
Tell the TV to stop saying there's two homosexuals in here.
I will, Sal.
Jim was a strong actor. I had worked with him on stage also. And he had a caustic wit that could crack you up, you know. And he could crack me up by looking at me. But he was an outstanding actor who also left us too soon.
You all right, Leon? What's the matter? Give you a shot down the hospital or something? Huh?
Oh, God. They shot me with, like, Unreal. At the time Dog Day Afternoon was filmed, I was basically a theater actor. I'd never done a movie before. And I looked at this script and I thought, this is one of the great scripts I think I've ever read. And I immediately, something clicked, and I had a real sort of strong kind of take on the character. So I went in and auditioned with Al Pacino and Sidney Lumet.
For the part of Leon, we read a lot of actors, and Al always read with them because it was important for me to see how the two came together. And Chris came in and read, and while he was reading, we were looking at each other because we knew we had it. This was the one.
Chris Sarandon was, again, another, you know, we just sort of got lucky with Chris. He was just there.
Well, I couldn't explain the things I did. So I went to a psychiatrist who told me that I was a woman trapped in a man's body. After the audition was done, Sidney came to me and he said, we want you to come back, but the next time, a little less Blanche Dubois, a little more Queen's Housewife. And that was the sort of key that unlocked the character for me. I got no job, I don't have friends, I can't live, I have to live with people.
And he, again, never played any of the gay things. I think in the final performance, the most that happens is that the wrist droops a little, but nothing in the speech other than a kind of whining quality, because the guy was a whiner.
I can't, I don't know what's... I can't.
But that had nothing to do with being gay. That had to do with just a certain kind of man.
During the time that I was sort of coming up with the sort of physicality of the character, I, during the day, would just sort of pad around the house in a pair of clogs, which sort of gave me the feeling of being a little kind of elevated and on heels. And I let my fingernails grow, and I thought, okay, you're going to do it, you got to go all the way. So I plucked my eyebrows, and I thought, that's what I'll do. I'll go into Manhattan, and I'll go with my plucked eyebrows, and I'll tease my hair, and I'll put on a little eye makeup, and just kind of absorb the stares of people in the streets. And I come into Manhattan, I'm in my get-up, and I start walking down the street, and I literally go into newsstands, into vegetable markets, not a sidelong glance. New York is a city that absorbs everything. Nothing phases New Yorkers.
It's Maria! They picked it up this afternoon.
He said he wants to know what time you'll be through.
I wish the fuck you never came into this bank.
Well, I'm a Christian, and my ears are not garbage cans.
The interesting thing, when you've got a group like that, the most important thing is that you do not cast them colorful, because then you'll have a bunch of disjointed vignettes going on, having nothing to do with the movie.
Who's Jenny here?
That's me.
It's a squabble.
That was the last thing I wanted. So I had them read anything. It didn't matter. I only wanted to see how close they were to themselves, how they used themselves. I didn't want characters. I said to the cast, I'm not interested in the real bank teller who did this or the real manager who did that. I don't know them. I said, I do know all of you, and even though you've got other names, it's you. You won't have any costumes. I want you to wear your own clothes. You get $2 a day more for using your own clothes. No accents other than whatever speech you normally have.
Algeria? Yeah, sure.
We're all going to sunny climes!
That it was a way of making sure that the sensationalism of the subject matter didn't become an obstacle to an audience's connection with the movie.
It was an interesting film because it was a group of actors who'd all worked together, either theater or something, but they all seemed to have a rapport. And Sydney rehearses a lot, and so the bank building became their home for a long period of time, and they were just a group that worked so well together.
Pacino and I were friends, and when they cast the movie, I wanted to go up for the gay guy that was, you know, the boyfriend. And I went and auditioned, and Sydney went, no, it's not going to work. This ain't going to happen. Then they offered me Murphy, which is the FBI guy. But this was my first film.
At least I know who I'm dealing with now.
And also, we did something that I learned from Sydney, which was he marked out every location on a ballroom floor. And no matter how small the role was, we all came there and sat through the whole movie to know right where we're going to be at. And it was like giving you not only respect, but a gift of, you're part of this, man. There is no small part. It's collective.
I think I rehearsed this 3 weeks instead of the usual 2, because there were so many people on screen for such a long time and together. And that feeling of a community and a group that was together was so important.
Where's Holland?
It's right,
It's right over there.
One of the most interesting things, about the 3rd day of rehearsal, one of the actors, I forgot who, said, well, Sydney, you know, you've talked so much about using ourselves in these parts. And they said, well, what about words? Can we use our own words? I said, for now, yes. In fact, I said, let's take it further. For these next few days, let's improvise everything. Let's not use the script at all. Now, I've never done this in my life. I'm not a great believer in improvisation. What happened was the results were so rich right away that I brought my sound man in, and we had a boom as the actors were moving, and we recorded the improvisations. And Frank and I and Bregman, we would sit and we composed the script out of the improvisations, so that by the time we began shooting, we had a fairly new script of the dialogue.
It's a nice way to work sometimes. I don't recommend it all the time, but when you have a scene that you're having a little difficulty with, it's not a bad idea to put actors who are somewhat there.
Listen, we got young girls here. You could watch a language, you know.
Together in a room and have them improvise, tape it, and then write a scene from it.
I speak what I feel, you know? Watch my language. Empty the drawer out.
Structurally, nothing was changed. It was his structure, scene by scene by scene.
Why, Leon, when things were going so good?
It's one of the great experiences I've ever had in film. It was my first movie. And I thought, oh, they're all going to be like this. Unfortunately, they're not, but I do have this to remember, and it was quite an extraordinary, extraordinary event.
Y tus trailers, visita mi canal.
Right now I can see it.
Who is it? Cops.
Shooting on an actual location added a grit to it, added a color to it. It was essential to the look of the film, and it was an essential character shooting this film in New York. New York is a character in a film.
The important thing about that opening montage is not to do the colorful things.